we're still going to roll with it. And now let's roll into our last segment here, which is going to be the breakdown on Moon Knight episodes 1 and 2. So we are filming on a Thursday, so we're thinking maybe do a Theory Thursday type of thing. So who knows? We'll see if it gains any type of traction whatsoever. But this is going to be, possibly we're trying to do these a little bit in a shorter section. So I think with that, break down anything from episodes 1 through 2, whether it's Easter eggs, whether it's going to be some theories, predictions, or just some, learning a little bit more about the characters themselves. So I do want to bring up something that Matthew mentioned in one of our last segments, which is going to be either from I believe the review. So he mentioned something very important I'll bring up a little bit later on. But there's one thing that I noticed, from the first episode that it's a little bit of a stretch, but I thought it might be pretty interesting. Might be a reference to the comics. So in the first scene for the entirety of the series, we're introduced to Harrow's character where he puts glass in his shoes and he just starts walking around, right? It really was not explained up until this point why he's doing like this self-laceration type thing. So I thought initially it was a reference to the comics. Like we know Harrow is now the avatar for the goddess Amit, but in the comics he is a scientist that specializes in pain tolerance. So with that, I thought it might be a callback to the comics in the sense that if he's able to walk on this broken glass in his shoes and he's not able to do like any wincing or whatever it may be, it's like he has fully been able to control the pain that is supposed to occur for these different, people if they were to be walking on glass. So I thought it was a callback that he's like mastered pain, something that Harrow was trying to, specialize in within the comics. So I'm not sure, that's a little far-fetched, but I thought it might have been a pretty interesting thing there. But yeah, I think with that, Matt, I'll hand it off to you. What are some of the things that you would like to discuss? Any breakdowns, anything that you noticed from the first 2 episodes that would be pretty cool to bring up?
Yeah. Well, your theory, first of all, sounds plausible to me. And, I guess time will tell whether you're right or not. But I decided to do a little bit of digging on the accuracy of the portrayal of Egyptian history in the show.
Yeah, go for it.
And I keep on forgetting this deity's name. Amun?
Oh, the Ennead? Amun-Ra. He's the Atum, I think. Yeah, he goes by a few names.
The god that Harrow wants to resurrect.
Oh, Amit. Sorry.
Amit. Yeah, that there.
Yeah,
I keep on forgetting. Apologies to all the Amits out there, but in Egyptian mythology, Amit is obviously a real deity, but there's also another deity who might be more recognizable to the average person, and his name or their name is Anubis. And they are a sort of jackal-human hybrid. It's essentially a dude with a human body and a jackal head. And it seems like for all intents and purposes within the show, Marvel has combined Amanon? I don't know.
Amit?
Yeah.
We'll get it one day.
One day. Amit and Anubis. Marvel has combined the two for whatever reasons. And one piece of evidence I came across that might support that is that when Harrow summons those creatures to attack Moon Knight, they're actually demonic jackals, which are direct references to Anubis. Oh. So it seems, and Anubis is sort of known as the judge in Egyptian mythology, and he uses a scale as his instrument of judgment. And as I'm sure our viewers will recall, Harrow has a tattoo on his right forearm of a scale that actually becomes animated when he's in the process of judging someone for any evil actions they've committed or they may commit. So that is just sort of like another piece of evidence that supports the theory that they've sort of fused those two Egyptian deities together for the sake of the show.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And it seems that they always have their little bit of spin on everything. And, from the books, like Stephen does reference the Ennead, and I believe part of that is Anubis. So those are like the 9 primary, like main Egyptian gods. And so for the comics, they did like a little bit of a spin off of it, where they based, these Egyptian gods on those Egyptian deities. And so they reside within their own homeworld known as, I believe it's Celestial Heliopolis. And so it's kind of like its own dimension that resides outside of the earthly plane. And it's kind of similar to like Asgard, I believe, somewhat, or possibly, one of the other dimensions that are out there. And so in order to access it, there needs to be, some nexus to serve as like that bridge between Earth and their homeworld. And within the comics, that place happens to be in Egypt, somewhere where Mark is actually at the very end of this recent episode. So to me, it kind of, I feel like, is a good transition to point out that I believe, what we do know is that Hera is trying to set the goddess Ammit free, and is going to be using that scarab as a compass in order to find her tomb. And so kind of with Mark having that connection with Khonshu, they're kind of able to communicate to know where this tomb is going to be. They're probably going to try to stop Hera from allowing this to happen. Now, the intentions as to kind of the conflict between Khonshu and Ammit somewhat unclear right now, but it's believed that that nexus is probably going to be brought up and is going to be within Egypt there in Cairo. And so that's probably why it was taking place there at the very end. So I feel like that's kind of the connection between like the Egyptian gods and kind of where they reside and then what's going on right now. And I just realized another thought popped in my head that I'll keep going off of, which is that we probably were introduced into our first, we were introduced to the Egyptian gods a few years ago. And this is something I brought up in kind of like on social media that I thought was pretty cool, was that in Black Panther, the first Black Panther comes to really gain their powers whenever after the vibranium meteorite lands in Wakanda. They have the 5 tribes that form, and it does come into conflict as to which one is going to be the most powerful. So then within the midst of that conflict, there is the panther goddess Bast that appears to the Wakandan warrior and then brings him to the heart-shape or air. What's the proper term? The herb, that gives them the Black Panther powers. And so I think that vision with the panther goddess Bast, we don't really know a whole lot about it back then, in 2016, whenever this was, or 2018, whenever this was released, because mainly we're not sure if it's true or not, what was going on with this warrior. But now, since we're brought into the Egyptian gods, we actually received our first hint way back then in 2018 because Bast, as a matter of fact, happens to be a member of the Heliopolitans, so with these Egyptian gods. And it's just that whenever all of them kind of went back into their homeworld, Bast and a few others went over to Wakanda to serve as like the patron deities for that group there. So there is kind of that overlap and connection between the two that I thought would be pretty cool to bring up, something as like a kind of a little bit of an Easter egg from that first episode whenever Mark is actually discussing or kind of looking over the Egyptian gods and that text there. Well done. Yeah, so that's kind of something that just reminded me of with while we're talking about the Nexus, the Heliopolitans, and then that group there. So there's certainly a lot of things that are also brought up. So Matt, do you have anything else that you may have noticed either about the characters? Doesn't have to be related to the comics, just something to kind of further describe, I guess, into?
Well, I think what you just described is a testament to Kevin Feige's genius.
Oh, just
being able to connect things that aren't visible to us. I mean, I wouldn't discover that on my own. They're
always so far ahead on so many things, and they're able to their little creative freedom, the spin that they put on all these characters, it makes sense. So one of the things that just made sense to me that you were discussing in that last review section that we just did on Moon Knight is that you were mentioning how within the first episode, Stephen Grant is trying to like kind of go ahead and learn about what's going on with Marc Spector, trying to uncover this other identity, these other voices that's going on in his head. Like, to put in your words, you said that he is like basically making a detective out of himself, and we see that at the very beginning of the second episode. Now, what's really interesting is that whenever Stephen Grant summons a suit for himself, he turns into his, the Moon Knight kind of persona that he has is that of someone who's dressed in full white in a suit. And now that, to him, is his interpretation of a superhero, of what a superhero does and what he looks like. Sure enough, in the comics, that person that's dressed in all white in the suit is known as Mr. Knight, someone who is, in fact, a detective that helps out with police investigations. So his, like, Stephen Grant, what he was doing in the first 2 episodes, trying to learn more about Mark serving as a detective, now translates over to the superhero that we see in the comics, that being Mr. Knight. So that's kind of like their own little creative spin on it. So really, like, Stephen Grant aligns with the persona of Mr. Knight, that being the detective, and then Marc Spector aligns with the badass of like Moon Knight, the one that dresses to, beat the shit out of all these different jackals and stuff. So kind of have that connection between the characters that we're introduced with to the superheroes that we know of in the comics is really interesting and just very awesome to have that little connection between the two.
Yeah. And Marvel's done a brilliant job with making sure that their heroes' costumes are always an outward expression of their personalities.
Yes.
Right?
I think that's the best way to sum it up. That's the best way to sum it up.
Yeah. We've seen it with Iron Man suits. We've seen it with Spider-Man suits. We've seen it with Captain America suits. There's always a story to be told through the suit itself. And I think that's something that can be very hard to do subtly, but Marvel manages to do it almost every time.
They always have some creative way of going about it, and it's just amazing to kind of see it once again. Now that we know a little bit more about their origins, like I don't even think we would have been able to make that connection if we didn't really know a whole lot about them. But fortunately, what they do in this, like the first 2 episodes, is like we do kind of have bits and pieces of their past, which we're able to learn more about from kind of like the earlier video that we made on his origin before the series even came out. So one of the things that we do learn is that from Mark is that he basically traded his life to Khonshu in order to allow him to survive. That is something we learn of in that second episode as he's talking with Steven very briefly there. And that from that interaction, we learn more about the archaeologist that passed away, that those 2 henchmen were saying whenever they brought Steven to Harrow in the middle of the episode. So we learn a little bit about most likely Layla's father. Now, in the comics, it's most likely believed that Layla is Marlene Alron, serving as that character. So it could possibly be Layla's father, the archaeologist that passed away, and really passed away because of the nemesis, Raoul Bushman. So we'll possibly be able to see Raoul Bushman a little bit later on. Really the mercenary that resulted in Marc Spector being left for dead in Egypt, that caused him to kind of transform into Moon Knight. And I think while on the topic of his past, there is a brief mention of someone else, that being Jean-Paul Duchamp, who actually we get a brief mention of in the first episode. So whenever Stephen Grant is scrolling through his little burner phone of Marc Spector, we see all these missed calls from Layla. To me, if I was doing that to a girl, it'd freak her out. But to, Mark, to Steven, no harm, no foul. But anyways, within like one pause that we see of one of the callers, it's Duchamp, and that's a reference to one of his best buddies who was also a mercenary, Jean-Paul Duchamp, also known as Frenchie. So we could possibly see him pop up later on. We don't know if he's still around, and we might, see him in a callback at some point whenever Mark and Stevie are Frenchie are possibly working together. But if not, I still thought it was a really cool callback to his past, and I'm not sure if they'll really dive into it, but to kind of have these little Easter eggs with the archaeologist, possibly having Bushman be included, Frenchie as well, to his origin, I thought was really cool, and this is something that you obviously mentioned in their last video with the advertisement as well. So those Easter eggs are starting to kind of pop up a lot more, and it's really cool to see.
Yeah, we still got 4 episodes left, so and we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, no, it's we're learning a lot about the characters, and there's so much to come. And I think one of the final things I will mention before we kind of wrap up here is from what we've seen, it seems that like the connections that they have and a little bit about their story is that like the connections to Khonshu seems to be a little bit kind of distinct. So Steven, it seems that like this is a new identity, so it really does not seem to add up to the fact that like the trauma from his childhood caused this dissociative identity disorder, because of the fact that like Steven really is only figuring this out right now of his different identity, and from that we learned that Mark, who's someone who's been in the body obviously his whole life, has a very strong connection to Khonshu. He's able to willingly talk to him, something that Steven can't quite do as of now. And he's just someone who's a lot more confident, really knows what's going on in the game with Khonshu there, as evidence at the very end. He was talking to Khonshu about possibly switching with Layla, his wife, and it's not ideal. So we're not really sure if Khonshu is good or bad quite yet, considering the fact that he's willing to trade spots with, his wife Layla to have her serve as the avatar. But also we're not sure if Amit's quite, correctly, the right one, because even though he's wants to kind of create this new heaven, at the very end, it seems like once Haro gets the scarab, he immediately kind of kills that one man that had it. And it doesn't really seem like he did that ritual that we've seen in the past. Or, we really see the scales moving. He might have just sucked the soul out of that person's life. I'm not sure if he judged him like in a quick instance and we just didn't see it. But to me, it seemed like it was very biased as to who was being killed, and really might not be the Amit or the plan that we really know of from the beginning. It might be a little bit different from that, and Amit might be a little bit biased as to who she is going to end up sucking the souls from in the end. Because again, I didn't really see any type of judgment going on. It just seemed like, here's the scarab. All right, sorry, you're gone, buddy. So who knows? And we'll possibly find those out in the next few episodes. But Matt, do you have anything else to add before we kind of wrap this up?
No, I'm sure there's a hidden motivation that will be revealed to us at some point, because I'm guessing that Haro's not completely devout to, his ideology. I'm guessing he's somewhat power hungry too, and that's playing a role here.
Yeah, so we'll see exactly what happens, whose intentions are what, but there's still 4 episodes to find that out. We'll probably come back in the next few weeks here to do another deep dive on the episodes 3 and 4, but we really hope you enjoyed watching. Feel free to let us know if you picked up on anything else that we may not have found initially. And so feel free to follow us on social media for some more condensed content, for some specific breakdowns and other memes as well. And then also we'll try to be posting these on podcasts as well. So feel free to follow us there. And as always, as Matt says, feel free to like, subscribe, ring those bells. And thank you all very much once again. And as always, this has been the Weekly Snap.
That was a good one.
For me, it seems so delayed, but time will tell. That seems so off. I still can't oh, now I can snap. Of course I can snap now. I just can't do it otherwise, but all right.